Under the violet hush of a dying star, a distress signal drifted across the void like a final, trembling breath. It whispered through ion storms, skimmed the frozen edges of dark nebulae, and found its way to the unlikeliest place of all, the borders of human space. No one knew who sent it. No one knew why. But the moment Earth's deep space receivers caught its broken cry for help, something ancient stirred within humanity, an instinct older than civilization itself. When someone calls for help, humans answer. Even if the caller is not human, the joint Terran response fleet assembled in silence, its hulls matte black and battle-scarred, forged in the furnaces of a species that once learned to survive on a death world. Engines charged with the soft, thunderous hum of antimatter breath. Soldiers stood in formation aboard the flagship Resolute Dawn, every heartbeat echoing with a strange mix of compassion and suspicion. Humanity had seen too many traps hidden inside pleas for mercy. They had tasted betrayal in a dozen star systems. But they never ignored a cry. As the fleet slipped into folded space, the stars stretched into ribbons of white fire. Pilots steadied trembling hands, not from fear but from anticipation. Somewhere ahead, someone, or something, was suffering. Humanity would find out who. And why. When the fleet emerged from warp, the system before them looked wrong. The star's light had a sickly color. As if poisoned by something older than physics. The planets were cracked like shattered pottery, continents split open by colossal forces. It was devastation on a scale humans had only seen in ancient apocalyptic myths. And at the system's heart floated a lone structure, an orbital fortress the size of a small moon, scarred and still burning. Its hull displayed symbols no human database recognized. Some letters were jagged, others curved, all carved into the metal like desperate prayers. A single beacon still flickered beneath the scars, signaling the same message on repeat. Not a trap. Not a demand. Simply one phrase delivered in a trembling alien voice, "Help us." The fleet approached with shields active. Drones fanned outward, scanning debris fields littered with the skeletal remains of ships and space stations. Every reading made less sense than the last, massive energy scars, the kind caused by exotic weapons far beyond human design. Whatever had done this wasn't just powerful. It was surgical. Precise. Merciless, boarding parties prepared to enter the silent fortress. Their exosuits hissed and locked, weapons magnetically holstered but fingers hovering close. The air inside the fortress was cold enough to burn, full of drifting ash and broken machinery. Gravity flickered in patches, causing dust to rise in slow-motion spirals, and then they found the first bodies, not humans. Not anything recorded in galactic catalogs. These beings had 4 arms, translucent skin, and crystalline growths along their spines. They lay collapsed at their stations, frozen mid-motion, as though death had struck them without warning. Near the command dais sat one survivor. Or what remained of one. A withered figure cocooned in a life support harness, breathing in shallow, rattling gasps. The moment it sensed the human presence, its remaining eye, a luminous silver orb, widened with raw terror. Not at them. At something behind them. Something that wasn't there. It tried to speak, but the words were fractured, glitching between frequencies like a broken radio. A translation AI pieced fragments together. Barely forming a coherent whisper, they answered. Too late. The fortress shuddered. Human helmets swiveled upward as metallic groans rippled through the walls. Footsteps that weren't human echoed from the distant corridors, fluid, skittering, unnatural. The survivor's trembling hand lifted toward the sound, as if to warn them, but its final breath escaped like a fading spark. The life support harness dimmed. Its eye turned to empty crystal, and the deep corridors roared. Something was moving. Many somethings. Fast, humanity had come to answer a call for help, but they had stepped into the aftermath of a massacre. And whatever had caused it was still here, shields flared. Weapons cleared their holsters. The air vibrated as inhuman shrieks echoed closer, sharp enough to rattle stone. The Deathworlders had arrived, and the darkness stirred to meet them. The first silhouette burst from the far corridor, a blur of razored limbs and gleaming carapace plates streaked with the residue of slaughter. It moved with a predatory elegance, too smooth and too fast for comfort, like a nightmare designed by something that understood fear at a molecular level. Behind it came more, dozens, then hundreds, pouring through the broken halls of the fortress in a tide of onyx bodies and luminous, predatory eyes. The human boarding teams didn't hesitate. Reflex built from centuries on a death world took over. Weapons roared, lighting the darkness with muzzle flashes that carved brief, fiery halos across the corridor walls. Pulse rounds hammered the front lines of the swarm, each impact splattering iridescent fluid that steamed as it hit the deck. But the creatures didn't break. They didn't slow. They crashed against human shields with the force of meteor impacts. The fortress trembled beneath the weight of battle. Sparks fell like burning snow. Human exo-armor strained as soldiers locked into formation, backs to one another, a circle of defiance inside a storm of teeth and claws. The creatures screeched, a sound so discordant it rattled nerves and scraped at the subconscious. Yet the humans stood their ground. Firing with surgical precision even as their boots slid across the deck, one creature leapt, jaws unfolding like mechanical irises. It met a plasma blade mid-air, splitting into dissolving fragments. Another barreled toward a medic, only to be thrown back by a kinetic hammer strike that cracked the floor. The boarding teams were outnumbered beyond reason, but they were not overwhelmed. Humanity had learned long ago that numbers meant nothing against a species that refused to fall. Still, the fortress was too infested to hold. Command relayed the order, fall back to the extraction point. Cover each other. Move fast. As the teams retreated through broken corridors, the walls around them flickered with phantoms, holographic recordings damaged beyond coherence. They showed flashes of the alien species that once lived here, elegant builders, crystalline structures rising like sculptures of light, children playing in zero-G gardens. In another flash, those same gardens burned. Families ran. The creatures hunted them down. The recordings dissolved into static. Humanity was late to this tragedy. But not too late to avenge it. The soldiers breached a sealed bulkhead and stumbled into a massive chamber that once served as the fortress's central observatory. Its dome was cracked open to space, exposing a view of the shattered planets circling the dying star. And in the center of the room lay something unexpected, a colossal crystalline console. Still active, still humming with life, it pulsed softly, almost like a heartbeat. A squad engineer approached, scanners flickering. The console's surface shifted under their gloves, revealing deep grooves and fractal patterns that formed a map, a star chart, but distorted, showing paths through impossible geometries. At its core was a singular symbol, a spiral with a burst of light at its center, unknown. Ancient. Not the alien species. Something else. One soldier reached out and touched the spiral. The console responded instantly. A surge of light enveloped the room, blooming outward in swirling waves that froze the charging creatures mid-leap. Not killed. Paralyzed. Suspended in a shimmering amber-like field. The humans backed away in awe as the entire fortress hummed, pulsing as though it had awakened from centuries of sleep. The light coalesced into an image, a figure shaped from starlight, its form shifting between human and alien proportions as if trying to meet them halfway. A ghost made of data. A memory with a voice. We called to the Deathworlders, the apparition whispered, its tone fractured yet pleading. Because only you fight the darkness. Only you stand where others kneel. The chamber dimmed. The hologram flickered, revealing scenes of a vast cosmic expanse, star systems collapsing like extinguished candles. A shadow moved through them, titanic in scale, devouring light and life alike. Planets cracked. Civilizations vanished. All consumed by the same nightmare force now stalking this fortress. The apparition's voice trembled. It found us. It is coming for you next. Before the humans could process the warning, the chamber's stasis field shattered. The creatures howled, freed. The starlit hologram collapsed. And in the distance, deeper than the fortress walls, something massive stirred, something older and far more dangerous than the creatures themselves, the humans' activated beacons. The fleet prepared for war, something had found them, and it knew humanity had arrived. The fortress groaned as if awakening to a nightmare it hoped had died long ago. Deep within the structure, something enormous shifted, a sound like metal continents grinding together, like the slow inhale of a beast that had slept for millennia. The human soldiers felt it through their boots, through their armor, through their bones. Whatever lived beneath those decks wasn't simply another creature. It was the reason the star system had been dragged to ruin. The reason an entire civilization had died screaming. The boarding teams tightened their formation as they backed toward the extraction shaft. The swarm pressed after them, no longer a chaotic tide but suddenly coordinated, as if guided by a single mind. Their movements synchronized, their shrieks harmonizing into a chilling resonance that vibrated the air. They weren't just predators. They were heralds. The Marines fired in controlled bursts, illuminating the shadows with arcs of blue-white light. Bodies fell, dissolving into shimmering dust, but more followed. The corridors behind them twisted with motion. Claws scraped against metal. The fortress pulsed in warning, then the floor shook again, harder, deeper. Dust rained from the ceiling. A ripple of gravity distortion rolled down the hall like a silent shockwave, warping light itself. The swarm halted as if in reverence. Something was coming. The boarding teams reached the extraction chamber just as the floor split open with a thunderous crack. A massive shape surged upward, tearing through armored bulkheads as though they were tissue. It rose into the chamber in pieces, plates unfolding, tendrils unfurling, eyes igniting one by one in rings of molten gold. Each movement felt deliberate, ancient, practiced. It wasn't an animal. It wasn't a machine. It was both, a biomechanical titan forged from star metal and flesh, shaped like an inverted obsidian flower with serrated petals, crowned by a core of writhing tendrils and burning eyes. Its presence felt wrong, like gravity was bending around it. Space seemed to ripple at the edges of its form, as though reality itself struggled to contain it, a distortion guardian, a war seraph of the ancient destroyer whose shadow had ravaged this system. The soldiers steadied their weapons, but a single pulse of energy from the creature knocked half the squad to their knees. Their shields flickered. Armor systems screamed warnings. The Titan descended toward them with a whispering hum that felt like a chorus of distant stars dying, yet even in the face of this cosmic horror, the humans did not retreat. They braced, teeth clenched, hearts hammering not in fear but fury. Humanity had never bowed to the predators of their homeworld. They had not surrendered to empires, tyrants, or extinction. And they would not bow now. The Titan's tendrils lashed outward. A Marine intercept jumped forward, absorbing the blow with their shield. The impact detonated like a comet, hurling them across the chamber. Another Marine dove beneath the Titan's strike, sliding on scorched metal, firing a point-blank plasma burst into its glowing core. The blast staggered it, but only barely. Its wounds stitched themselves shut with liquid metal strands. The soldier stared in disbelief. It's adapting, someone breathed across the comms. It learns. The Titan lunged again, faster than its size should allow. Humans scattered in different directions, using speed, agility, and instinctive coordination that no enemy had ever fully understood. Humanity fought like cornered lightning, chaotic, brilliant, lethal. Above them, the resolute Dawn locked onto the extraction bay's coordinates. The ship's AI assessed the situation in milliseconds and made a decision that would have made any diplomat faint. It dropped the bay's blast doors. Enormous slabs of armor crashed into the room, slamming down between humans and Titan. The creature shrieked, the sound bending light like a heat haze. The doors didn't slow it for long, but they bought precious seconds. The extraction hook shot down. Marines leapt and clipped on as the Titan tore through the first door. Shrapnel rained across the chamber. One Marine slipped, falling, reaching, a hand caught their wrist. Another soldier, armor cracked and visor shattered, held on with a roar that drowned out the monster's shrieks. They hauled the fallen Marine upward just as the second blast door buckled. The hooks yanked the humans into the darkness of the extraction shaft. The Titan lunged up after them, its tendrils slicing through metal like molten knives, but a barrage from above hammered it back. The shaft sealed. The fleet opened fire, the fortress exterior ignited in a blaze of antimatter bursts and kinetic salvos. The Titan howled, its roar echoing through vacuum like a shockwave of pure malice. But it survived. The blast threw it backward, tearing chunks from its body, only for those wounds to begin knitting again. Humanity had won a minute. Nothing more. Aboard the Resolute Dawn, the Marines staggered into the bay. Armor smoldering, hearts still racing. Sensors screamed with new readings. The Titan wasn't alone. More signatures were rising from the depths of the fortress. Dozens. Then hundreds. The hologram's warning rang in their minds. It is coming for you next. The fleet formed defensive lines around the fortress, guns hot, shields bright. And in the center of the command deck, the starlit map still hovered, replaying the same impossible spiral. A path through broken space. A destination the dead civilization wanted humanity to see, a warning, or a request. The fleet commander whispered the only words that mattered: what hunts them is hunting us now. And far below, the fortress cracked open like an ancient egg, as the first wave of war seraphs ascended into the starlight. The war seraphs rose from the broken hull like a storm of living blades, their bodies reflecting the dying star in fractured shards of crimson and gold. Space itself seemed to bend around them, their movements carving ripples through the vacuum that shimmered like heat haze on desert sand. The fleet braced for impact, but nothing could truly prepare them for the onslaught. The first wave struck the defensive perimeter with the force of a meteor shower. Shields flared white-hot. Hulls groaned. Shockwaves rippled across the bows of cruisers as the war seraphs slammed into armor plating, carving through alloys designed to withstand the fury of neutron storms. The fleet returned fire in blistering volleys, plasma lances streaking across space. Kinetic rounds trailing comet tails, ion bursts painting the battlefield in electric blue. But every hit only slowed the creatures, never stopping them. On the Resolute Dawn, deck plates vibrated under the weight of constant impacts. Officers steadied themselves, barking updates as crimson warning sigils flooded the command holodisplays. Hull integrity dropped in harsh, jagged increments. Gravity flickered. Systems rerouted and rerouted again, then a beam of searing gold slammed into the starboard side, cutting through armor like silk. The ship lurched sideways, dragged off course by the sheer pressure of the attack. Alarms wailed, echoing down every corridor, but the humans fought back with a ferocity that defied logic. Strike wings launched in tight, flawless formations. Fighter craft streaked through the chaos like shards of lightning, weaving between war seraphs and firing point-blank bursts that exploded in shimmering arcs. Pilots pushed their frames to the limit, pulling maneuvers that ignored safe thresholds, twisting through debris fields and spinning past tendrils that sliced asteroids in half. A lone pilot cut through a war seraph's core with a plasma scythe, banking hard as the creature detonated in a ripple of collapsing gravitons. Another pilot rammed a crippled fighter straight into a Titan's eye cluster, sacrificing themselves to slow its regeneration by a precious few seconds. Humanity fought with the ruthless ingenuity of a species that had evolved on a planet that tried to kill them daily. Still, more war seraphs kept rising. Within the command deck, the starlit map flickered with new intensity. The spiral symbol pulsed faster, brighter, almost frantic. As if the dead civilization was trying to communicate through echoes of their last breath. The phenomenon overwhelmed the display, projecting light across every surface, burning the spiral shape into the minds of all who saw it. The fleet commander stared into the swirling shape, realization forming like a shard of ice sliding into place. It's not a warning. It's a path. A path to what? A weapon? A refuge? A trap? There was no time to question. The war seraphs were beginning to merge, interlocking their bodies into immense shapes, colossal beasts of metal and void light. Leviathans designed for stellar extermination. Their combined energy signatures soared past thresholds no human instrument had ever recorded. The dying star flickered. Its surface rippled. The war seraph collective drew power from it, siphoning its life, accelerating its collapse. A supernova was being engineered before the fleet's eyes, a weaponized star. If it detonated, the blast would tear across subspace like a scythe, ripping open fault lines that could reach the borders of human space. The starlit spiral pulsed again, and the fleet commander made the decision that no human had ever dared before: plot a course for the path. All ships, prepare the fold engines. The fleet aligned into formation, hulls trembling under the destructive symphony unfolding around them. As the engines charged, waves of energy rippled through space, bending starlight into swirling arcs. War seraphs hurled themselves toward the ships, shrieking in distorted frequencies that rattled neural implants and shook teeth in their sockets. Just as the creatures closed in, the system's star convulsed, its surface tearing open in blinding bands of light. The precursor detonation began. Gravity wailed as space buckled. The fleet jumped. Fold space blossomed around them in spirals of white fire and violet storms, each vessel vanishing into the maelstrom an instant before the system behind them exploded in a supernova that devoured itself. For a heartbeat, there was only silence. Then the ships re-emerged into a starless region, a cavity in space where even the cosmic background was muted, as if sound itself had been carved away. Before them stretched the impossible, a megastructure the size of a small galaxy, shaped like a hollow ring of fractured light and drifting stone, slowly collapsing upon itself. It thrummed with ancient energies, like the dying breath of something once divine, and at its center waited a silhouette, vast, coiled, dormant, the source of the war seraphs, the true enemy, a being older than stars. It had noticed their arrival. It was awakening. The silence of that hollowed region felt heavier than gravity. The fleet drifted at the edge of the colossal ring structure, every ship dwarfed to the scale of dust motes against its titanic arcs of shattered stone and dying light. The surrounding void tasted wrong to human sensors, as if it had been emptied of time, scraped clean of history. No echoes. No radiation. No memory. Only the presence waiting in the center, coiled like a gravitational storm that dreamed. The being stirred. Light bled from its form in slow, molten rivers, illuminating its outline. Not a creature. Not a machine. Something between a concept and a god, forged from collapsed stars and living metal. Its body resembled a cosmic serpent, thousands of kilometers long, wrapped around itself in spirals that matched the symbols seen in the fortress. Each motion distorted space like ripples through a black ocean. As the being awakened, the megastructure groaned. Entire fragments drifted loose, crashing into one another like drifting continents. The ring pulsed with an ancient heartbeat, deep, resonant, echoing through every human hull. The fleet held position, engines warm, weapons primed but silent. The commanders stepped forward on the command deck, breath caught in their throat. Every instinct screamed to run. Every principle demanded they stand. The being finally lifted its head, eyes ignited along its length, not 2 eyes, but hundreds, arranged in concentric rows that widened until they formed a halo of molten gold. Each eye felt like a star collapsing inward, ancient hunger staring at a species that refused to kneel. The temperature across the fleet spiked as its gaze drifted across them. Hulls glowed. Armor softened, and then the being spoke, not through sound. Not through radio. Through gravity. Its voice resonated in the bones of every human, a deep rumbling pressure that felt like sinking into the ocean's darkest trench. Words formed in the mind, fractured and colossal: you trespass upon the Devourer's cradle. The fleet shuddered as the gravity pulse forced several ships off alignment. Some crews clutched their chests. Others staggered, overwhelmed by the crushing weight of the entity's presence. You answer the cries of the fallen. As they did. As all did. They built the plea. You followed it. You feed the cycle. The humans felt something colder than fear. The distress call had not been a warning. Not a message from the dying. It had been bait, a lure crafted by victims forced into desperation, and humans had been the latest to follow it, the being unwound itself, drifting upward in a slow, serpentine spiral. The megastructure cracked further as it rose, shedding fragments that tumbled and shattered like frozen waves, the weak call for help. You, who come when summoned. You are the richest prey of all. War seraphs emerged from the shadows of the megastructure, forming constellations around the being like armored angels orbiting a dying sun. Their movements synchronized with its pulse, rising in shimmering flocks that darkened the void. The commander gripped the rail of the observation deck, eyes burning with resolve. Humans had fallen for a trap, but that didn't mean they were beaten. Deathworlders had evolved on a planet that demanded creativity under pressure. A species that refused extinction did not cave when outmatched. They adapted. Across the fleet, engines roared to life. Shields flared. The formations tightened until the entire armada moved like a single organism made of steel and fire. Drones launched in waves. Missile pods unfolded with metallic clicks. Charged particle beams hummed like distant thunder. The Devourer serpent tilted its colossal head, curious. The humans attacked first. A barrage of light tore through the void. Plasma lances, kinetic harpoons, rail slugs accelerated to near-light velocity. Missiles spiraled in elegant arcs, thrusters blazing. Drones flared out in swarms, weaving around war seraphs with lethal intelligence. The serpent shifted, space folded in a ripple of darkness. The weapons slowed, distorted, crushed under the pressure of a gravity well the size of a moon. Rail slugs warped into spirals. Plasma streams collapsed into flickering embers. Energy bursts stretched into threads of dim light. Only a fraction made it through. But the fraction was enough. A rail slug punched through one layer of the serpent's armor, tearing off a section of living metal. The wound bled luminous particles that drifted like stardust. The being hissed in gravitational fury. The war seraph swarms surged forward, reacting in perfect unity. Fighter wings engaged them in a storm of twisting, lethal dances. Pilots pulled impossible turns, dragging contrails of vaporized metal across the void. War seraphs lunged, weaving between shots, adapting, learning, evolving mid-battle. Human pilots pushed their bodies to the breaking point, hearts pounding, vision narrowing under crushing G-forces. A carrier exploded in a blossom of white fire, its hull unraveling into glittering fragments. A cruiser split down the middle under a seraph's blade. A frigate rammed a war machine twice its size, self-destructing in a flash that blinded sensors, yet every loss fueled the human's fury. Inside the resolute dawn, engineers rerouted power through systems not designed to hold such strain. Plasma conduits threatened to melt. The core hummed dangerously. The ship trembled, but it stayed in the fight. The fleet maneuvered closer to the serpent, forming a spear of warships aimed directly at its heart. The humans knew they could not defeat a cosmic predator through strength alone. They needed to reach the structure it guarded, the collapsed center of the ring, the origin of the spiral symbol. The path, the answer, the only hope. The serpent sensed their intention. It coiled, tightening, preparing to strike with the force of a supernova. The humans accelerated, the swarm converged, space folded, light shattered, the final charge began. The fleet hurled itself toward the collapsing heart of the megastructure, engines screaming as they tore through distorted space. The serpent lunged, an ocean of burning eyes and gravitational fury, its tendrils unfurling like black suns birthing themselves into existence. War seraphs swept in first, their bodies trailing ribbons of molten light as they formed a living barricade between the humans and the spiral chamber. The lead ships fired in a relentless cadence, each barrage carving tunnels through the swarm. Fighters swarmed like furious sparks, weaving through death with impossible precision. Some burst apart in silent blossoms of flame, others rammed headlong into seraph cores, sacrificing themselves to buy centimeters of progress. a human frigate shattered under the serpent's tail strike, its pieces twisting into fractal shards as gravity folded around them. Another vessel vanished in a ripple of darkness, crushed into a bead of superdense matter. Yet the fleet didn't slow. Humanity pushed forward with the unstoppable determination of a species driven by something greater than survival, by stubborn defiance, on the resolute dawn. The commander stood unflinching as the serpent's shadow loomed across the viewports. The holomap projected the spiral chamber ahead, now only moments away. The structure groaned around it, its colossal plates peeling apart as the central core cracked open like a dying star revealing its heart. The spiral was not a symbol, it was a key, a gateway made from the memory of a fallen civilization, a weapon they had never managed to activate, one meant to destroy the Devourer. The serpent sensed their approach and unleashed its full power. A wave of gravity crashed into the fleet, flattening shields, distorting hulls, bending ships like cloth. Steel screamed. Beams snapped. Entire decks imploded. The resolute Dawn buckled, lights flickering as systems overloaded. But it held on. Every human aboard held on. The commander's voice cut through the chaos, steady and fierce, full burn. Hit the spiral. Now. The ships positioned themselves into a perfect spear formation, engines blazing with everything they had left. Plasma trails ignited behind them in sweeping arcs of blue and white, illuminating the battlefield like a storm of stars. Warships threw themselves into their path, claws carving void ripples. The fleet sliced through them, shredding wings, shattering cores, leaving a wake of burning wreckage. The serpent roared, a gravitational scream that made entire hulls bow inward. It struck, tendrils sweeping to crush the formation before it could reach the spiral, but the humans had planned for this. A battle carrier broke formation, accelerating straight at the serpent. Its engines flared into a star-bright inferno. The serpent turned, sensing the threat too late. The carrier rammed into its coils and detonated its core in a blinding eruption. A hole ripped through the serpent's armor, spraying cosmic matter into the void. The monster recoiled in agony, and in that heartbeat of staggered motion, the fleet reached the spiral chamber. The megastructure's heart opened like a colossal iris, revealing a swirling basin of fractured light, a vortex of compressed spacetime. Rotating in the same elegant pattern the alien holograms had shown. The spiral pulsed, reacting to the fleet's presence, its glow rising like a heartbeat awakening after centuries of silence. The resolute Dawn plunged into the chamber first, its hull aflame. The ship fired a final energy lance directly into the spiral's core. The vortex erupted, light flooded across the battlefield in a wave of white fire, sweeping outward in perfect spirals. It touched the warships first, freezing their movement, then tearing them apart molecule by molecule until they dissolved into shimmering dust. The shockwave expanded, gaining momentum, gaining hunger. It reached the serpent. The Devourer entity shrieked. Its gravitational skin peeling away in swirling layers as the spiral's energy carved through it. Its eyes dimmed one by one, bursting like supernova seeds. Its coils writhed in collapsing loops as the weapon unraveled its existence. The serpent lunged toward the humans in a final act of defiance, but the spiral seized its essence, pulling it inward, folding it into a single point of impossible density. Light bent. Space screamed, and then the serpent vanished. The megastructure shattered around the fleet as the spiral closed, collapsing into a silent flicker of dying light. The shockwave dissolved into soft, drifting particles, the last memory of a civilization that had clung to hope with its final breath. Silence returned to the void. What remained of the fleet hovered in the wreckage, wounded but unbroken. Only a fraction of ships had survived, drifting like ghosts through the remains of a battlefield that had nearly consumed them. The resolute Dawn, scorched and trembling, steadied itself as emergency lights flickered alive. Humanity had not just survived, they had answered the cry for help, and brought judgment upon the Devourer. Across the bridge, battered soldiers looked out at the empty void where the serpent had been. They saw the fragments of the ancient ring fall away into dust. And in the quiet that followed, they understood what they had done. They had ended a cycle of suffering that spanned across epochs. They had become the force the dying civilization had prayed for, In the quiet darkness, as the wreckage drifted like falling snow, the commander whispered the words that would echo across human history: Deathworlders don't run. We rise. The remaining ships ignited their engines, turning toward home.